this panel says about we're going to be talking about the blockbuster, but it's really going to be about writing, right? So we have Jeff Nathanson, who has written a bunch of amazing films: Catch Me If You Can, Rush Hour 2 and 3, Tower Heist, a bunch more, and then Steve Conrad, who's a local Chicagoan. Secret Life of Walter Mitty, Wrestling Ernest Hemingway, The Weatherman, the John Belushi biopic that's coming out eventually, and just announced the Bobby Riggs, Billie Jean King project with, I think Will Ferrell is attached to it for now, as we say. So I'd like to give them a round of applause and a warm welcome. Come on up, guys. And we have water here. It's just water. So, thank you both for coming, and I don't have anything planned, so I usually turn these things into just a conversation between us and questions I want to, find out about, and we'll open up for the audience a little bit later. But I guess the first thing that I'd like to find out is, why did you get involved in movies? I mean, what was it? Sometimes I talk to my students about when you're 10, it seems like. When you're 10, there's a movie that you see that does something to you, that says, wow, this is something pretty cool. And I don't know why it's 10 or around that age, but for me, I was 10 when Star Wars came out, for better or for worse, and ended up seeing that thing, 100 times or something. And I could point to that film and say that was the reason I got involved in film. Is there a film, Jeff, that you saw when you were younger and was like, wow, this is something?
It was the fart scene in Blazing Saddles.
The fart scene in Blazing Saddles?
100%.
Classic.
We had one of the first VHS players, and we had one movie, which was Blazing Saddles. And so it was just on an endless loop. And my friends would come over, and I would have screenings, and they'd sit, and then a new group would come in. And
yeah, that sounds familiar. We're probably close in age. We had an early VHS too, and I'm well aware of how other filmmakers have gotten their legs under them. Martin Scorsese, for example, had a theater at the end of his street, and we'd see whatever was playing. So we'd see a different movie every week. Mm. But I grew up in the suburbs, and we just had an early video store and a VHS, so rather than see a different movie every week, we would watch the same movies
right.
40 and 50 times.
Right.
And a lot of John Hughes movies, for
right.
sure.
Yeah.
Blazing Saddles, the Monty Python movies. But for me, it was The Jerk. It was the Steve Martin movie.
Yeah, it's funny, because I had that same thing, too, because we had one of the first VCRs, and it was The Jerk and the Blues Brothers, I think, were one of the two first releases on VHS.
Yeah, both of those movies, in fact. The Jerk, they're very different, but they were influential on me, and I think I know why they were independently influential on me. The Jerk just seemed like the way I was already spending time with my friends, like something that I really enjoyed doing was just being goofy and trying to earn laughs in a group of really funny people. Mm-hmm. And it dawned on me that if you can be exceptional at that, you might be able to make a living. But that movie seemed to explode out of the energy of this performer, mm-hmm. to produce something heretofore kind of undone. It was I guess Charlie Chaplin is an antecedent to it, but not with that energy of I'm only making myself laugh, and right. you might accidentally laugh along too. Mm-hmm. But The Blues Brothers is an exceptionally well-directed movie. Mm-hmm. It's a movie that came from a pair of performers. The genesis of it did, but that director turned it into a film, and it's an extremely well-directed movie, right. and it holds up extremely well. So that movie turned me on to the craft of filmmaking, versus The Jerk that gave me the energy. I think the hints at what this energy could feel like.
Yeah, I remember when Steve Martin was the thing. I mean, back in the 70s, Steve Martin was the guy, and it was, from little stand-up clubs to, arenas. And I remember when I was younger, I actually got one of his records.
Yeah,
and
the King Tut record.
Yeah, the King Tut record. And I wrote a letter to Steve Martin to be in his fan club, and he sent me The Arrow Through the Head.
Oh.
Yeah, rest is history. Rest is history. So your career, though, what Jeff, if I can ask you, like, what was your path then? Did you go to school for this? Was it something you wanted to do at an early, age from that point when you saw the, Blazing Saddles, or was
No,
this?
because I didn't know it existed. I mean, these days you guys have the advantage of knowing, I think all young people even know that this is something that is real. But when I was a kid, I had no idea you could write movies. I just thought you went to movies. And it wasn't until I went to college, and in my freshman year I opened the syllabus, and there in the syllabus it said screenwriting.
Oh, yeah.
And I went, oh.
Where did you go to school?
At that time I was at UC Santa Barbara.
Okay.
And so I walked straight to the guy, because I was into journalism, and I was very much into sports writing and stuff, but my passion was movies. So it was almost immediate. I walked in, I went to the guy, and it was I said, "You're the screenwriting teacher?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Okay, I'm going to take your class." He said, "I don't take freshmen." And I walked out, and I don't even know why, but I cried. It was the weirdest thing, because I had never thought or said the word screenwriting to anyone, and I just knew that I was being denied, something.
Right.
And I waited the year, and I went and took the class, and I just started writing.
What grade did you get?
I did very well.
That's good. That's good.
In my screenwriting class, because I finished, I finished my script, I think, pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And that's what they said to me. The first sort of critique I had was, he said, you write at length. And I took that. I was really excited by that.
Do you remember what, because I remember in college the first screenplay I tried to write and finished it. And do you remember what it was that you wrote?
Yeah, no, I wrote a script called The Oval Office, which is about a guy that wins a raffle to become president of the United States for one day. And at the time, I was obsessed with Bill Murray. So it was essentially a Bill Murray movie. And so I wrote it, and a couple months later, I got third place in some little screenwriting competition.
Oh, cool.
And I got a check for like $50. And that was it. You get the bug, and then you're just kind of off and running and
Right, very cool.
keep writing.
Steve, what did you go to? I mean, you went to Northwestern, correct? Is that
I did, but I didn't study writing. I lived with my brother, who was an actor, and I just read one of his scripts, and
your brother Chris?
yeah, Chris Conrad. And inside of this script, there were all the sort of elements of the basic craft of screenwriting accidentally.
Was this Chris was in The Young Hercules, right?
No, but it wasn't.
Was it-
It
was
wasn't a TV script. It was a feature. It was a Ron Howard movie. Tom Cruise in Ireland. I wish the names escaped.
Far Away.
Far Away, yeah.
Right. It was Far and Away, and Chris
Right.
was auditioning for it, and it was a pretty craftful piece of writing, and it was a good accidental first read for me, because somehow I thought this is how you're supposed to do it, and it was a good. It had the landmarks of craftful writing. But at the same time, I felt like I could do it. I wasn't over-challenged by it. It didn't seem beyond me to be able to do that. So I started writing right away. And like Jeff, it never occurred to me that someone sat in a room and labored to create the story that the actors then go and the director mounts. They seem to just, exist on the screen.
Yeah.
And then I got turned on then. It was the early 90s, and some exciting filmmakers were showing up. Spike Lee and the Coen brothers, and you were starting to see some distinctive and artful writing on screen. Generally, like indie movies were starting to become more available to the general public. So I felt like there was a way to do this and be proud of what I was trying to do too. And it amounted to me then feeling like something a little more than just making a living.
Okay. And then from there, for both of you, was there after you got out of school, did you try to get an agent? How did you, a lot of students that are here are going to be graduating
all of
soon.
you, everyone will take a different path. Unfortunately, there's no kind of one way to do this. But I was very patient. The way I did it, I was just patient and wrote a bunch of scripts until I was sort of happy with one, and it took a while. And once I had kind of the one that I said, okay, this one's okay, and the other ones were not so okay. And I knew that instinctively. I knew they were not great. They were okay. They had moments, but they were not great. And I had one that I kind of finally felt like I read it from beginning to end. I thought, oh, that kind of works. Then I just you know, in those days, I got the list from the Writers Guild of every agent. You'd go there and they'd hand you the list.
Mm-hmm.
And I just started sending out letters and, will you read my stuff?
Can I ask, like, in that early stages when you were kind of new at the whole, the area, was it, has your craft changed, like in the way you kind of come up with a story or structure it? Has it changed since then, or did you follow any particular book or?
It wasn't so much book. I think I've just matured and, probably become a little, more knowledgeable about how it all works. But I think that I had sort of, in my head, I always just had a basic sort of structure to understanding screenplays, and that was always a big help, that I could sit down and somehow the scripts always ended up being about 110 pages, and they seemed to have a structure that worked. So that which is a huge part of it. It kind of just naturally, that part of it worked, and the rest of it was just a lot of work. And so I think I got lucky with the one part, and the rest of it was just sort of putting in the time.
Right. I find it funny that I try to tell students, and I think every screenwriting professor would try to tell students that structure is something you actually can learn and you can master that. I mean, it's not like, it doesn't have to be this, a fairy grants you the ability to do structure. I mean, you can actually just do it.
Yeah.
The other stuff, you might need a fairy for. But
Yeah. But I think structure, too, is one of those things that, it's so important, and yet, especially in the beginning, is less important. Especially in the first few scripts, I find it to be a burden in a way. And so even though my early scripts are unstructured, kind of, I think that there's a kind of a liberation to all that when you're first starting, because like you said, eventually you're going to figure out, okay, something on page 30 is this,
Right.
and so it's just about writing, in the beginning. For me, it was anyway. The first 4 scripts were just about getting those scripts done and then going back and realizing I can fix them or not. But mainly what I can do is go to the next one and just keep going to the next one.
Mm-hmm. Stephen, how about you? I know you wrote Wrestling Ernest Hemingway was it during school?
It was at the end of school.
At the end of school.
At the very end of
Okay.
school. Yeah, and I got really lucky that that some actors responded to the material, and
That's really annoying, by the way.
well, that movie was made, and then I had 12 years without another one.
I
being
feel
made.
better.
Good. But the fact of the matter was, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have a handle on how to do it again. It was an accident.
But it was lucky, and there was. You're saying it's an accident,
well,
but there's still stuff
yeah,
there.
if you could deduce any lesson from that. So I wrote it 21. Wrote consistently from then until when I was 30, but it was 10 years before I had another movie made. And what happened over that period of time, I think, is that I do have, I think, like Jeff, I have a knack for being able to tell a story. And the structural thing, it can be learned. It amounts to craft. Nevertheless, some people are good at telling stories.
Mm-hmm.
And when you say someone is good at telling a story, I think what you're really saying is they're very, very good at structuring a story so that you stay put and stay tuned and care about the outcome. And screenwriting is different than novels, because people sit in one place and you let the whole thing beginning, middle, and end, and they don't get up and leave. It's it must maintain someone's interest immediately and over the full period of time. Novels you pick up and put down, you come to them when you're ready. I did have a knack, even in that first one, for structuring a story. I lacked any expertise that would allow me to apply that craft to the next story. I knew how to align that particular one up, but I didn't quit, which I think is the key. And I recognized that the craft is essential to being able to share your story with an audience. And the things that don't work for me when I get submissions and trying to determine a common denominator among the scripts that I read that I pass on or don't work for me or don't get out of our office, is that they lack craft, essentially. And you have to have an astonishing quality of voice to get away without a story that has some integral structure, some integrity to the structure of the thing. It can be done. It's seldom done, and if it's the business plan then it's a risky one. If you're foregoing really studying what the movies that you love do. And over those 10 years, I just watched many, many more movies and learned about them like you learn about movies that you love as a fan.
I remember I saw Spike Lee talk back in the early 90s, and he was kind of the new thing, and he was telling everybody like what the secret to him was: just watch movies. Just keep watching as many movies as you can and read as many scripts as you can. Even if they're bad, you're going to learn something about it. What can I ask you guys? So what's your craft like? How do you work? Do you work?
Wait, I have to ask one thing. So you're 21, and you're at school, and somebody calls you up and says, "We're making the movie"?
No,
How does that
I
happen?
wrote it, and I did the same thing you did. I got the WGA list. I found someone who was interested, and he had it set up just as I was finishing school. So I was able to finish school and then head out and start working the same week, essentially.
But then 10 years went by, and you know.
I have a question for you, though. Did you leave that agent?
I never got an agent.
Oh, from that list?
Never.
Well, so how did you crack through? You don't have an agent now?
No, I do. I do. I
Well,
do.
how were you able then to get through the gatekeeping with the...
The gatekeeping thing, I never figured out in terms of the agent. I had a lot of meetings and got close and just never signed with anyone. And then when I got hired to do my first job, I then went back to the agents and said, "Remember me?"
Oh, right. Yeah.
And then they were
Good.
surprisingly open
Yeah,
to
right?
representing me.
And what was that? What project can you point to as like the one that kind of opened the gate for you?
Well, that question can be answered in a lot of different phases in my life here. But I'll start with the first thing was I was working as an assistant. I was a PA on a TV show called Family Matters, and my office was literally in a closet. So they had took out a broom closet and they put a desk in there. And so I worked for these guys, and I was sitting there, and I would get them coffee and do that stuff. And I was making $275 a week, which was a lot of money at that time. And I got a call from Imagine Entertainment because they had read the script that I had mentioned to you guys, and they said, "We want to hire you to write a movie about the Secret Service, a comedy." And I said, "What are you talking about? What do you mean?" You know, I didn't even know that was something you could do. Like they had an idea. Like I thought I had a,
Right.
You have an idea for a movie? Okay. And you want to hire me to do it?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "So when? When do you want?" "Now. You're hired." So I said, "Okay." And they said, "We want you to go to Washington, D.C. and meet with the head of the Secret Service. You're going to go tomorrow."
Wow. It sounds like a movie plot, like, and then along the way.
Yeah. So I went to the boss, the guy that I was getting coffee. I gave him his coffee, and I said, "I got to go because I'm going to go to D.C. I'm writing a movie about the Secret Service." And so I went first. Back then they flew you first class. I was on a first class seat, literally like 24 hours later, sitting there, and I went to a hotel in Washington D.C. And I got into the room, and I was just so confused. And the phone rang, and the guy on the line said, it was like, "Bob Smith from the Secret Service. Can you come downstairs right away?" And I went downstairs to the bar, and there was a Secret Service agent there. And I said, "How did you know where I was?" And he said, "I'm Bob Smith. I'm Deputy Director of the Secret Service." I said, "But I'm meeting somebody tomorrow. I don't even know who you are. Like, what's going on?" He said, "Well, I wanted to tell you something. I have a script that I've written."
Oh, that's hilarious.
And that was kind of the moment I knew that I was a writer. Like, that's when you know you're a screenwriter. Like, somebody was handing me a script. And I said, I'll read it tonight.
What were you thinking then? I mean, you must have been kind of freaking out at that,
Yeah, I think
from a broom closet to,
I still am. I'm not over it. Yeah, no, it was crazy. And the movie never got made, and I did a terrible job on it. Awful. I didn't understand the plot or what they wanted to do, but it was a job, and that opened the door to an agent and a lot of other things.
Mm-hmm. Steve, what?
Well, in case you're thinking about quitting already, they still fly you first class. It's a union thing. They
I
have
thought we
to.
got down to business now.
No, I don't think so.
Right.
You've been flying this. Somebody told you that.
I have to call my
Yeah, you
agent.
Yeah, right, yeah.
No, it's really one of the cool things about the union. Here,
No, but we lost that in one of the negotiations.
They're still flying me first class.
Yeah, everybody flies first class. I mean,
Yeah, sure.
This is crazy.
yeah, right. So the 10-year drought that you were talking about, Steve, you wrote.
Well, it wasn't.
You actually,
it wasn't
but it's
a,
interesting
it
though.
wasn't
Like a
drought.
screenwriter, like writes a ton of stuff, and most of the time it never gets made.
Right,
And you
right.
wrote something that got made with some pretty big talent attached to it. I mean, that is pretty amazing. And so that must have led to other projects. I mean, people
Oh yeah,
probably.
it did for sure, for sure. I had work after that, but if you allow too much time to pass without getting a movie made, there are consequences. You get drowned out by the new people who are they're always coming. So it can. I mean, that's a long time to not have a movie out without having ever made a strong impression to begin with. You can do that if you're Terrence Malick, but you can't do that if you were me. So yeah, it was getting pretty tense until The Weatherman, and but 10 years later, I had a handle on it. I knew how to do it again. I knew what I loved about the movies that I loved. I knew my garbage can was filled with the ones that didn't work, and I had a sense of why they didn't work. But
Well, give me something that you love. Like, what is it that you are drawn? I've seen almost everything that you've
right,
done,
well,
and
I
so like, what
learned
is
that
it? What
for
is
me, the way for me to be able to share initially my idea with a group of people who then decide to pitch in, pay for, team up and come and work on a movie, I start with a role. I won't start to write unless I feel like there's a role in there, an actor, a good actor will choose among many other offers ultimately. Like, that's the challenge for me. And generally when my movies, when I'm fortunate enough for them to happen, it's generally because an actor decides to do it and for no other reason, because they're not designed to be appealing on the face of it generally. There has to be some other thing. And figuring that out about the way that I write allowed me to be able to prevent a lot of scripts that don't work from happening, I think. And I'll quit on a movie if I don't feel like the role is starting to really balance.
Okay.
That's my way in. There are many other writers whose way in is that they have to design the movie so artfully that it nails its genre and it becomes distinctive because it's excellent. And they continue to do that time and time again, and that's their way. So finding my way, it was a long, long haul, but it's amounted to my personal sense of craft.
Okay. But you both have, you both worked with Ben Stiller recently. And Jeff, you were talking about this project that kind of came to you, somebody had an idea. I know the Walter Mitty idea, or script, was floating around. There's been a bunch of drafts of that before. Steve, you got a hold of it. Is there a difference between the way a script that already has the kind of idea behind it that comes to you and they say, we would like you to write this idea that we already have, as opposed to you just kind of at a coffee shop thinking up an idea? Like what, Jeff, can you?
I mean, I think it's always better if it comes from you. That's my take. Something that sparks your interest, whether it be a book or a magazine or an original idea or whatever it is, I just find it, like anything, if it's something that you're excited by, it's always better. But having said that, given that this is our job, there are times when you are, being sent something and they say, can you work on this? Can you help this? So some people just don't, they don't ever kind of adapt to that world, and they don't have the ability to play in that sandbox. And so, I like to do both. For me, it's just, sometimes it's a little bit of a vacation from my own head to be on somebody else's dime, on someone else's movie, someone else's vision, and try to help them. But, I think you got to be willing to do both once you're in the game.
Do you, when you're writing, say like Tower Heist, do you know, that's a big project. It's going to be a big film. It's going to open up at thousands of theaters. The budget is probably, like a very, very large budget. It's a blockbuster, right? And
I wish it had been about.
well, but I mean, I would assume that is there more pressure then on you to deliver? Is there?
I mean, I think that there's pressure. I think, given what, kind of at the level, once you get there, that sort of goes away at some point. You stop. I don't know if you do this, but I don't necessarily think about when I wake up, okay, I'm writing today, right now I'm writing Pirates, 5, and Johnny Depp's going to read it tomorrow, and I'm going to have a meeting with Disney and the people that do the ride. And I don't think about that side of it.
That's all I'd think about, Jeff. That's all I would think about.
I go to sit in Starbucks and I take out my laptop and I get my latte and I start typing. And I think that's what I've been doing since I'm 18. So I'm able to cut that part off because ultimately it doesn't help you to worry about, Ben Stiller or worry about, anybody, truthfully. At some point you've got to deliver, and that's just the job of a writer.
Steve, what about you? When you, I know Walter Mitty was a project that has been around for a while before you took it on.
That was an odd one because there was source material, a short story, an extremely short story that people of a certain generation were assigned in school, but they stopped reading. It wasn't a brand exactly. The proposition of it, though, afforded us an awful lot. A guy who daydreams, and his daydreams intrude and prevent success in his real life. The Thurber story put a name on that sort of person who's always existed and does now. So that was a way into examining daydreaming, its rewards and its costs. But I didn't have the demand of satisfying a group of expectations that existed before I got on the project. It just amounted to a name and a little bit like a superhero sort of quality that the character had to be able to demonstrate.
Well, a lot of your characters have that quality. I mean, it wasn't a surprise to me when I heard that you're going to do the Walter Mitty project, because it seems like a lot of your main characters have this, there's something not quite complete about them, and emotionally there's something not there. And so when Walter Mitty came, it wasn't a big surprise to me.
Yeah, I was drawn to it for that reason, specifically for that reason.
Also a very tough script to crack, and something that had been around in some form or another about, through every studio. And so when you see something like that suddenly, get made at the level it was and be as good as it was, that's a testament to some really fancy writing. That is not easy.
Yeah. Once again, I'm just going to pretend we're just here and there's nobody there. Watching the film, after it was over, I loved the film. I loved the film, but it was like it didn't surprise me that audiences, it was mixed. Like it was, I could see why people, I loved it, but I could see why people are like, they were expecting maybe something, a blockbuster, and it was actually this much more internal kind of film.
Yeah, I don't know quite. Like Jeff, you'll be paralyzed if you do that thinking before you start. You just have to start, and then you have to finish. And if you let concerns about the way it's going to come over get in the way, you'll write timidly, and there'll be nothing to distinguish you from everybody else. And I think accepting that in our walk of life, if you're in this business for longer than 5 years, you're going to have successes that aren't due exactly to your hard work, and then you'll have failures that aren't due exactly to your hard work. And compounding work is continuing to write, writing so much that the force of all of it. My goal ultimately is to write enough that the force of all of it starts to count. And we have filmmakers who that's true of, and they've had long careers, not coincidentally. The Coens, Woody Allen. They have an audience now. Wes Anderson, Paul Anderson. And people wait for their next movie because their movies have one distinguishing characteristic that they couldn't have been made by anybody else.
Right.
And that becomes a calling card. It becomes a draw and power. And I think that if you're aimed there, it's a great place to aim. You won't get there immediately. You won't get there overnight. None of them did. and they all have had peaks and valleys, and they will. But the compound of the numbers of movies that they've been able to make have created a force. And there are exceptions to that. Orson Welles, I think, wasn't able ultimately to continue to make movies every other year, despite trying and being extremely gifted. That I don't know that he made those 12 in a row that people went back to 3 years after it failed and thought this one is really great. Like The Big Lebowski didn't do business when it came out.
Right, I remember. Yeah.
And it sure has since.
Oh yeah, for sure. Can I go a little off topic? Jeff, can you talk a little bit about, I mean, you've done I believe three projects with Steven Spielberg. Can you talk about how that relationship started and how these projects came about, and what is it about your relationship with him?
I've worked for his company a few times, and then I wrote a small movie at the time called Catch Me If You Can. That was sort of, I brought to them, and it was a book that I adapted that I said to them I thought would make a good movie. And so there was a script, and it was a very kind of small little character piece that they really was kind of on a shelf there. And 3 years went by, and I brought that to them because I had written the Rush Hour movies, and I was very frustrated because all I was being offered was basically buddy cop movies over and over. And so I thought, well, I got to try to do something different, or I'm going to just be writing this Rush Hour movie for the rest of my life. And so I wrote it, and it didn't go anywhere, and it just kind of sat there. And luckily, Leonardo DiCaprio, was sort of rising up at that time and becoming a star. And somebody had the bright idea of showing him the script. And once he got attached, it very quickly became something they were going to make. And there was a lot of directors, and I was excited by each one. I was a fan of each of these guys. And I was, just couldn't be, even Gore Verbinski.
Yeah.
And
I
lots
have
of...
two friends who tried to get that job desperately.
Who was the other one?
Peter Berg.
Yeah.
Peter Berg, yeah.
And and there were some great, it was a great time. And I was driving one day on the 405 freeway in LA, which is dead stop traffic, and I had my wife in the car. And the phone rang, and it was Steven's office, and he and I really had never spoken, in that kind of way. I'd seen him in the halls or at a meeting. He'd be sitting in the back, and he got on the phone and he said, we're getting the script out to all these directors. He goes, but I this weekend I took it to the Hamptons, and I had my kids read it at the beach. We had a reading.
That's cool.
I said, I don't even understand what you're saying. Like, who does that? And I'm just thinking, who are these kids? And
right.
Aren't they little? Yeah. But I guess they're kids and the friends, and there's actually a picture on my desk of him sitting at the beach with the script and his family around him, and so it's true. He said, I had the reading, and then after the reading, I said to the family, should I direct this movie? And they all said yes. I said, oh, what? And he said, yeah. He said, so I'm going to direct it now. And he goes, and when we have Leonardo DiCaprio, and I'm going to cast an unknown to play the FBI guy that's chasing him around. And I said, I think that's a brilliant
right.
Unknown, go with unknown.
Yeah.
And then a week later he called and said, well, actually, it's going to be Tom Hanks. That unknown idea we've...
Unknown in certain parts of the world. Right, yeah.
So it went from being a very small, dead project to sort of this other thing.
Yeah, but it's funny because it's a character piece again. I mean, it sounds like what you're both talking about is that it's focusing on this one.
Yeah, I mentioned to Jeff because Jeff and I just met today, and after I introduced myself, I complimented him on Catch Me If You Can. It's among my favorites. But I told him that everybody, when they go to pitch a movie, their movie, and the studio will say, what is that movie like? Catch Me If You Can comes up so often, and what they'll say, Catch Me If You Can, and your joke was meets Ghostbusters or whatever, but Catch Me If You Can is there because the characters are remarkably alive and distinctive and strong, and the story is strong. So when people cite it as an example, what they're saying is we're aiming at writing in a way that allows for you to recognize these as humans on Earth, and they're going to have they're going to have frailty and they're going to be heroic, but they might be more frail than heroic for long periods of time. And it's a trick when you pitch like that, because it's easy to say your movie's going to be like that. It's really hard to write a movie that works like that.
Do you remember like your first pitch in the industry? Like, because I know a lot of students are terrified of the idea, especially writers.
You know,
they realize that they do have to actually talk about their work in front of strangers, and it's terrifying.
I don't
to
really.
them.
I pitched on the MIDI movie, and it went badly. That was a tough one. But I don't really. I work with some people in multiples, and I live here, and I write my own stuff a lot. So I don't pitch a whole lot.
Do you have any pitch?
I mean, pitching is not something that, I don't know if you can tell, but socially, I'm awkward.
Yeah, writers in general, we choose this job because we love
we
to
don't
be left
want it.
alone.
Leave us alone. Yeah.
So pitching for me is probably the single worst part of the job, and I do it probably once a year. I have that thing where I got to go in that room, and there's those guys. And
It's miserable.
I just dread it, and
you can tell right away too. Like it's just if it's not working.
tough.
Right.
And my secret is I keep it, very short. Like I think that some people confuse pitching an idea with pitching a movie, and some people go in to pitch the movie, and they say, okay, so here's how it starts, and here's how and about 25 minutes later, they're still pitching the movie. And I think most of the people you're pitching to want to hear, about 18 seconds worth of good stuff, and then they're happy, and then so they can go tell their boss, and he can go tell his boss. So I keep it like it's 3 minutes, and I just go. I find it's like a comedian. Like I find the good 3 minutes of my act, and I get it down, and I have it memorized, literally memorized, and I pretend like it's not, but it's totally rehearsed. I go in there, I do it, and I go, "Do you validate?" And I get out of there.
That's great. That's great. Going back to Steve, you and Jeff. I mean, you both had like champions of your work, though, right? I mean, do you feel like it's important to have somebody like behind you? I mean, Ben Stiller, I think, my understanding is that he was really into your take on it.
You can't get there without that, because it's not a one-man job. It's a collaboration on a massive scale making a movie, and it goes beyond just the actor. There'll be a unit of 5 people who all have to have the same passion for it. They have to be sold on it to the same degree for a movie ever to happen. So it's an interesting. Jeff and I were just mentioning the essential qualities of a writer might not lend themselves to pitching, but you will be called upon to be a collaborator with people right away. And if you can't learn the art of doing that, your stuff will never be made. And it won't be made distinctively or well if you can't find a way to talk about the thing apart from the script itself. And that took some doing for me, and some maturing for sure. But it's one of the tricks of the trade, I think, just realizing that this is ultimately a social organism, movies, and writing is the opposite of that.
And you both directed. What's the difference?
Well, I mean, primarily that you're
More water?
Thanks.
Water.
You for half of your day is marshaling relationships and attitudes and tempers, and it's you have to be adept at that to be able to get everybody in the same place at the same time on the same page with the same purpose. Yeah, or you have to be commanding in some other way that people just trust you because they trust your work, and I'm not at that level yet. So you spend a lot of time talking and figuring people out, and every actor is different than every other actor. Every cameraman's different. You can't talk to them all the same way. You have to make the same mistakes on every movie again with just a different set of people. But it is fun. Writing is not fun. I mean, there are moments when writing is really fun and really rewarding, but largely it is a grind. And I'm glad that it is, or everybody would do it. It's the it's the essential demand of placing faith in yourself that you're not stupidly wasting your time.
It's funny as a writer, though, when you move into the directing chair, is there a different, I don't know how to put this, but do you look at the script in a different way?
I did. I mean, I started cutting things and chopping things, and so for me, I suddenly did sort of. But I guess I just became almost like a writer, but I don't know. I like became a writer that was able to be hypercritical of myself in a way I had never been before. So I just became vicious. And also
to yourself.
Vicious to myself, and also really said to all actors and everybody, let's beat these lines, let's try to improve it. But if you're not a social, because it's such a social thing. You are talking to people from 6 in the morning until midnight, literally. You're just talking to people, which is such a strange thing to do when you spent most of your life talking to absolutely no one for long periods of time. So it was a big adjustment. But to answer your question about the sort of having a champion of your work, I think it's really important at this stage that you find your champions, you find people that you trust. And I will say this, some people like to send their scripts out to 30 people and get 30 reactions. Find one person who you trust how they read a script and their opinion, maybe two. And use those people as much as you can. And because it really is, even to this day, I'll send scripts to the same people I've been sending my scripts to for 23 years, because I know that their gut reaction is going to be close to what is going to be wrong or right with the movie. So it really is important to find your peeps, find people that you can trust, that can read, and that can help you, because there's no shame and there's nothing wrong with getting help from people, from having people tell you what's wrong or right with your movie.
Yeah, I'll back Jeff up on that. I have a small handful of people, and they're always the same, and I always do it. But I think that there's another point that we're both making without making it distinctly. Rewriting your material, being prepared for that phase where you exhaust yourself getting it down. It's an accomplishment to finish. It is. But the real accomplishment is ahead of you. The real struggle is ahead of you. You have to roll your sleeves back up, and you have to do it again. I mean, extremely seldom does a thing come off fully finished the first time.
Except to you, of course.
But when you're talking about drafts, the impulse after you finish is to reward yourself, to be done, to feel really good about it, and then you bring that level of enthusiastic expectation into the first person you give the script to,
right?
And they feel none of it.
Right, sure.
It either works for them or it doesn't, and generally it doesn't, because it'd be a shock if you got it all the first time.
Yeah.
But getting good at getting your energy back up and saying the real craft of this is what I'm about to do in your second and third and fourth draft. I wrote the first way when I was 20. I felt like impulsively, that's the best I'm going to do. I'm going to start something else. And by the time I was 30, I learned that it truly is the profession. And I aimed at being, and still do, if I want to be considered a professional writer, not in the sense that somebody pays me for it, but in the sense that I understand and I've discerned what good writers have been able to do with their work on film, and I consider that professional writing. And you cannot do that on your first draft generally. It means collaborating, but it also means having a lot of stamina and perseverance, and less pride, more shame, and that energy that got you through. You've got to summon it back up, and you got to get excited about the rewards of rewriting, because they're manifold. They're everything.
Yeah, I try to tell my students to watch the movie Misery as a metaphor for, that's what screenwriting is. You finish it, you have a cigar, have some champagne, and then you got Annie to deal with, on the rewrites.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, right. They wanted me to get to the Q&A, but I might have a couple other questions. Is there anything happening now, writers, filmmakers, trends that you're excited about, that you look at and go, wow, it's pretty cool? I mean, a lot of people have talked about this new, True Detective type, 5-part mini series kind of thing that seems to be getting a buzz in the industry. Is there anything that you both look at and go, wow, this is pretty cool, and I'm interested in this, or no?
I mean, just for me, I love that stuff. I'm watching all the new TV stuff, but I still, I still think there's hope for movies, and if you can kind of wade your way through it, it's still, for me, the thing that I wake up and think about. I still there's something different about going to a movie. And,
Yep.
So, I don't think movies are going anywhere. I think that the bells and whistles of 3D and all that will hopefully kind of run its course here down the road, and we'll get back to a little bit more of a kind of traditional storytelling, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, I think the art form is going to go somewhere in response to the quality of television now. It's going to force movies somewhere we don't expect. They're going to have to, the art form is going to have to grow into something that allows it to be worth the trip to the movie theater and the price of it when you can sit at home and really watch multiples of extremely well done filmic storytelling now. And you're able now, it's not just that the quality's gotten better, the delivery system allows you to watch them in multiples. You can watch 3 episodes of Breaking Bad, get you 2.5 hours of cinema quotient without going to the movies. And filmmakers are going to respond to that one way or another.
Right. Yeah, I was just watching Fargo, the TV show on FX, and it's so nice to actually see Billy Bob Thornton acting like a psycho again. And,
yeah, well, I think it's a challenge. It's a challenge to filmmakers, and I'm hoping that enough rise to it and figure out a way to allow movies to be the distinctive place to come and watch expertise.
Cool. I think I have to open up the Q&A. I keep getting these signs pointing to me. So are there, there's a spotlight over there. Go for it.
Hi there. First of all, thank you so much for coming. It's a pleasure to have you both. So I have a quick question for Jeff Nathanson. So in both Catch Me If You Can and with the 4th Indiana Jones movie, you've worked with George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, who are some of our most iconic directors. Can you tell about that experience? Because when you're screenwriting, it can be, it's just you and the paper, and then to be working with directors, and just that experience of A, working with them, and B, maybe the difference of that process, because also Catch Me If You Can and that 4th Indiana Jones movie are two very so different.
Yeah, I worked with Steven on Catch Me and The Terminal, and then on the 4th Indiana Jones movie. I only worked with George on Indiana Jones, and so I did. Working with Steven was amazing, and very much kind of, once you got over the concept of who he was, just a very kind of roll up your sleeves and let's get to work sort of thing. My experience with George was unique in that I went up to Skywalker Ranch, and they had been spending a couple of decades trying to figure out how to get the 4th one going, and so he and I kind of lived up there for a while and worked with him on figuring out some story points for Indy 4. And that was obviously, for someone who was a Star Wars geek and stuff, just not, my brain always had trouble sort of getting around that whole thing. Because you'd walk into the big main house and there would be the whip from Indiana Jones, and there would be all the Star Wars stuff in this room, and there's the toy room, and it was just a whole thing that was incredibly uncomfortable but exciting and intimidating and fun. But to answer your question, at the end of the day, when you're talking story and you're talking screenplay, there's really only one language. So I don't care who you're talking to. It can be the craziest actor on planet Earth, Chris Tucker, or it could be, a crazy director. It could be, it doesn't matter. It could be Steven, it could be George. At some point when you're talking screenplay, everybody kind of speaks that language that's done it a lot. And it really becomes just a working environment that once you get over who it is you're sitting across, whether it be actor, director, whatever, it becomes very much like this. It becomes a conversation about how can we make it better, how can we make it work. And whether or not that happens, it doesn't always happen, but that's what we're always trying to do.
Thank you so much.
Mediator? I mean, there was a lot of press at the time between Lucas and Spielberg that they were having some creative differences on the direction, and I guess it was up to you to kind of mediate where the story's going.
I was not a mediator. I mean, they're like old brothers, so they always are fighting or getting along.
Okay.
But They don't need me to mediate.
Do you create the set pieces too? I mean, all the action sequences, that's part of the screenwriting?
Yeah,
Or
we
is that-
write everything. We write every single thing you see.
Wow, that's great, it's impressive.
How's it going, Steve and Jeff? Thanks for being here. Rush Hour 2 and The Weatherman are two of my favorite movies, so thank you. Steve, my question's for you. You talked about having roles in mind when you're writing a script. So did you have Nicolas Cage in mind for The Weatherman? And if so, how was his reaction to the part?
Well, I didn't have it in mind when I wrote it, but I wrote it to be, I guess, interesting to the kind of actor Nick is. So I was thrilled when he responded to it, and I did multiple rewrites afterwards with Nick on board to make it to lend itself more to his set of talents and the sounds that he makes. But he's yeah, as an artist, I mean, he's my favorite kind of actor. There's a sort of, and he lends himself to good writers because he can sit quietly and it creates tension. He has a lit wick kind of calm, like you hear the sizzle of the dynamite even though he's not exploding, and it allows writers to sit in quiet spaces longer because you know there's going to be this impending release, and he carries it extremely well. And I tend to write roles for that sort of person. So I am a huge fan. I'm dying to work with him again.
Thank you.
Was Tom Skilling any influence on The Weatherman?
He was a big help. He was our technical advisor.
Yeah.
He's our local weatherman.
Yeah, he's the Weatherman.
He's the weatherman.
He is the Weatherman.
Yeah.
Hello. Thanks for sharing both of your experiences. It's been really good listening to you both. So, if someone wasn't to go to LA and a person like me who's completely new to writing and to use the tool of writing to express or to move forward what I intend to happen or to cause. So, and I can't or don't want to be in LA, which is a great place in any case. So what would be your tips? What would be your advice to get started on writing and to be super successful, which is
I have some advice.
an illusion.
Just you're going to have to create more control of your material, and that might mean making up your own stories, making sure that the property belongs to you, that you're going to ask people to come to you essentially rather than for you to go to them. You're going to have less relationships to foster work with, but it can be done. But you're going to have power. You're going to have to find some power, and creating your own stories from scratch is a way to arrive at that. I mean, then you'll have, if you do it well, it belongs to you, and if it belongs to you, people will and want it, people will come to you.
Damn it.
So how does the
exclamation point
process
there.
of untimidifying and also unhurting of all of us, how does that work for screenwriting and being successful?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Could you just repeat it?
I'm not myself very clear on my question. I'm sorry. Okay.
That's
So I guess we all have some degree of, hesitation, fear,
How do you get
timidity.
over the intimidation of the
Right, and
the
to break
scope of
through
what you're
all
trying to
that
do?
and to break through in this
You-
field
I think that
successfully.
You start. You need to start. So start.
Yeah, and you need to start because you need to finish, and as soon as you finish, you're going to cut through the numbers by huge multiples because
Right.
most people don't finish.
Right.
So just having the dedication to get 110 pages done, to have a beginning, middle, and an end, the numbers of people that you probably feel like you're competing with get cut down by 80%. And then if you allow yourself the realization that we still need good writers, like there's a job for hire sign out in Hollywood. We need good writers. It's not full. You can tell because most movies are written in a way that feels like a lot of people could have done them. there is room for distinctive and strong filmmakers. The gate's not closed, and you can get it open by being good. And if you're good, if you finish and you're good, you're going to be in a small company.
Yeah, I also tell people to have two. Don't just have one. You finish your script and you're like, oh, this is brilliant. I'm going to go take this wherever. If you don't have another one, you're doing yourself a big disservice, because you're going to come across somebody that says, wow, you're a pretty decent writer. I don't like this script. Do you have anything else?
They take
Yeah,
5
yeah.
years, 6 years, 7 years. So you can't. We see guys in the rooms holding their one script, and they're just holding it like
Right.
their life depends on it. And that's bad energy with people, with girlfriends and boyfriends. Like people, you want to feel like you're at ease with your powers, and one way to get at ease is to do it more than once.
Yeah.
And is any of you open to mentoring?
Jeff was just mentioning.
Yeah,
the
Jeff
green
really
room
wants
that
to.
He really wants to mentor.
Great.
You know, let movies be your mentor. I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
just watch the ones you love many, many, many times.
Good.
Hi, this question's actually for Jeff, or I guess Steve, if you have experience on this. It's just about, you said that you've had movies where they turn out, you feel it turns out good if it's something you get excited about, like you had Catch Me If You Can, you based it off a book, it was your idea. When you write something like one of the sequels, like you're working on Pirates of the Caribbean or the Indiana Jones movie, how was that with those ideas that you had and pitched to the movie makers, or did they come and find you when you worked with them, like coming up with the stories for something? Because at that point, those are obviously the characters that already exist.
Yeah, the characters are there, so it's just a matter. Usually, the process doesn't change. You're still the writer, so you know we forget how much power we have because we're the only ones that can do it. So at some point, they say we're going to make this movie, and we're going to make the second one, or the third one, or the fourth one, or the fifth one, whatever they're doing at that time, and they usually turn to a writer and say, what do we do? That's generally how it works. Sometimes there's a director and a producer that have strong opinions, but at the end of the day, you know, one of us will be in the room, and sometimes, you know, that's how it gets done. We do pitching. We could be multiple people. You could write a treatment, but it's pretty much the same as writing any script. You figure it out, except you know the characters.
It's also, the other thing I want to add is, I say this a lot to students. I met David Lynch once, and he told me this, and I love David Lynch, and he's such a weird dude, but he somehow knows everything, I think. And he said, if you don't like this, why are you doing it?
Yeah.
Like, if you don't like making movies as a director, if it's a pain, like, oh, it's so tiring and exhausting, you should definitely not get into the industry, because why would you do that to yourself? If you're a writer and it's a big pain to actually do this stuff, to kind of live in your mind and work at Starbucks and write and have a schedule, if it's hard for you, really, really hard, and you don't like doing it, get another job, because that's what it is. I mean, that's what it is. Writing's writing. Writing is, whether in Starbucks or with a bunch of other people, it's the process of coming up with ideas and characters, and same thing with directing. If you don't like directing, you don't like any of that kind of stuff, there's going to be lean times, like Steve was talking about, where you're trying to do something else, and if you don't really love it, it's so easy to give up. It's like, why? I don't even like doing it. I'm going to give up. That's why I think most people, like you said, you're ahead of the game if you actually finish, because most people think it's a pain in the ass to do this stuff. And on some level, it is a pain in the ass.
And there's no harm in not. I mean, if you don't finish, you don't finish. Not every single human being on earth is a screenwriter. And the ones of you who will finish a script, and maybe 2 scripts, that's probably a small number. The ones of you who write 4 scripts and 5 scripts, I bet there's 5 of you in this room that will eventually, because it's a pain in the ass. And you have to just love it. You have to wake up and want to do it, and that's all you want to do. So it's definitely something, like you said, you have to love and want to do every day.
This for both Mr. Nathanson and Mr. Conrad, kind of touching upon what you guys are talking about. for many of us that are screenwriters here right now, when we write, there's no really there's no pressure. Nobody has expectations. We don't have no deadlines. How has it changed for you since you wrote your first spec script to now? And then, I mean, I understand you guys try to shut it out, but is it ever the same once you kind of get noticed in that process?
Well, yeah, deadlines become a brand new thing. They become a new element to contend with. I mean, they're real when you're in production, but it can foster a lot of creativity. It can foster a lot of problem solving. It can create a lot of adrenaline you need to get you through. But you're doing the same job, which is making decisions about what's going to happen next in the story, and the best way to do that. The clock's ticking when you're working for somebody. Our contracts all have weeks to deliver in them. It's usually 12. So you can spend less time waiting for the magic to happen, and you have to start adding up pages, hoping that something else takes over. But if you do it for a few years, something else will take over. That's the craft you have will start to take over. And then the more movies you watch, the more you'll have in the back of your mind. There's more solutions in the back of your mind. There's more examples of how other filmmakers did it. So the time you spend getting better at it, it corresponds with the time you spend watching more movies, and then they coalesce, and then you have the chance to be really good because they're both cooperating. And deadlines get less intimidating because you've hit them before, I guess. But there's a risk in not having anybody waiting for your stuff too. And you can make it too personal. It can read to someone else like a diary entry, and that makes for miserable reading someone else's diary.
Why don't you have deadlines? Does school have no deadlines?
No, we do have deadlines.
On your projects, right?
No, of course we have deadlines.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a deadline tomorrow.
Yeah.
Go work.
I know, right?
What are you doing here?
But what I'm saying is the pressures. Like right now, when I write, I mean, it's I feel kind of free, but then after,
Yeah,
you guys, once you guys to get somewhere, there's expectations,
The pressure is something you have to deal with, and some of us deal with it better than others. But it's something all of us deal with, and it's hard. I mean, I think we're making too light of it. It's a killer. It affects your personal relationships, your health. It's a big deal. You generally deal with it badly and take it out on other people until you're done.
But the freedom that you feel in writing, that will not change. That continues. Doesn't matter how horrible the deadline is. There is a freedom to being a writer that will stay with you, and that's probably the best part about being a writer.
Thank you.
Let's take one more question.
Hi, I guess Matt started to ask that question. I think Jeff mentioned Starbucks a couple of times, but how do you guys work? How do you sit down and write? Where, when?
So we can stalk you.
Which
Did you do that in
Starbucks?
Starbucks? Some of the day?
Well, I kind of wake up and go wherever I decide to go, whether it's Starbucks or another coffee house, or I stay in my bedroom, or sometimes I used to have an office. I'd go to an office. It doesn't really make a difference to me. It has nothing to, it doesn't matter. I could be on a bus. I could be wherever. So generally, I do work better in a coffee house that has no Wi-Fi. Would be my #1 place to work.
Yeah, I write in an office because when I didn't, when I wrote at my home, I would just write all day and all night, and it was too much to ask for the people in my life to tolerate that. So it still happens on some time crunch projects, but it helps just personally to have a place for it to dominate your life, and then another place. I can't write in public. I have a weird kink. I can't write when anybody's standing behind me at any level. I have to have a wall behind me. So I can't write at the coffee shop. But it keeps you awake. I mean, the times when I've done it, it keeps you awake. But seeing other writers write really dispirits me. It makes me nervous. I assume automatically they're better than me.
Yeah, they're writing a better script, right?
Yeah.
And then the guy behind you is stealing your idea, and he's going to make it better, right? Right. Well, thank you for the questions, and I think thank you guys for
Thank you, Matt.
coming.